To really answer your question, you have to have complete and utter faith in yourself and your talent, and know that if you're putting good work out there, it's going to lead to more good work.
Listening to Inside Acting, a podcast dedicated to demystifying the inner and outer game of success in the entertainment industry. I'm AJ Meyer.
And I'm Trevor Algott, and coming up in episode 269, part 3 of my chat with director Bryan Beasley, in which Bryan shares what it's like to be working as a freelance director, going job to job, not really knowing what's coming next or when, how success is always a combination of focused effort backed by faith. Love that. The difference between working hard and working smart, and a whole lot more. That's episode 269. Stay with us.
Support for this episode of Inside Acting is brought to you in part by Rehearsal Pro, the next version of Rehearsal, the essential app for actors. And it's now available in the iTunes App Store, so if you want to learn your lines, be off book for your auditions, explore your character, make stronger choices, and do a whole lot more, go to rehearsal.pro/IAP right now to learn about all the great new features in the new version of Rehearsal, the groundbreaking app designed by actors for actors. That's rehearsal.pro/IAP. And by printheadshots.com, superior headshot printing. At printheadshots.com, all orders include, get this, free shipping, free retouching, free layouts, free proofs, and no hidden fees. You don't pay a dime until you approve your proofs. And you can use promo code IA, that's IA as in Inside Acting, to get $5 off your order. Most orders arrive within just a day or two, so for superior printed headshots, visit printheadshots.com and use promo code IA for $5 off. Printheadshots.com. Superior headshots at the lowest prices, guaranteed.
Hey, Ajmajir. Blame it on Siri, or is it Siri? I think they called you Ajmajir.
Oh, probably.
I don't know.
Siri doesn't know who I am.
So we have 2 new members to thank for joining us inside the membership, joining the inner circle of the IAP family. Christian Fernando Cerna. Welcome, dude. Thanks for joining us. And Matthew Edwards. We're so stoked to have you guys inside the membership, sharing your insight, wisdom, discoveries, taking part in our Artist's Way IAP cluster. And Grace Gordon has been so wonderful about just holding the space and providing prompts and encouragement. And another big thank you to Grace for just being an IAP rock star, especially with this group, which has been amazing, the IAP cluster. So you were in New York, and you had an audition for a Broadway show, or is this still to happen? This is happening later today, or something?
It's happening later today. Yeah, after we're done recording, I was sitting. It's just a fun story. I was sitting in my agent's office. I haven't seen them in person since I left New York. So it's been like over a year, almost a year and a half. And I was sitting in their office. One of their computers dings. They get an email, and it is an audition for me, and I'm sitting right there. It was kind of funny. So I'm going in for a Broadway replacement for the lead in School of Rock.
That's so cool.
That part is insane. That got I started listening to the soundtrack, and I went back and watched the Jack Black film, and he must be on stage the entire time. I can't imagine how that story gets told without him being on stage the entire time. And if you listen to the soundtrack, there's 2, maybe 3 songs that he's not on, and everything else is either a solo that he does or him singing with the ensemble of the kids, the students. I don't know. It's a lot of material, and I've never I always knew that this was a thing, but I had never sort of experienced it myself. On the appointment, when I got sent the appointment, it said, be prepared for a 30-minute work session, which I guess typically you would find in a callback, but they were saying that for the initial audition, it says be prepared to be in the room working for a half an hour. Like, all right, cool.
It's like, it's the, you know, my agent always used to say that your audition is your first day of work. It may be your last day of work too, but treat it as your first day of work. Show up prepared, ready to work. And what a gift to have the opportunity to work for a half hour on your first day of work in a room where it's usually less than 5 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you know, we book things, right, with those ones that are less than 5 minutes, but it's quite a gift. And, you know, one of the things that my agents were saying is they wanted me to, you know, create a relationship with this casting director. I've never gone in for her before. So now I have like all this time to make an impression. Hopefully I'm not a jerk. Am I a jerk, Trevor?
You're a big fat jerk.
Damn it.
Emphasis on the big and fat and jerk.
Wait, that's all. Wait, what?
That is so cool, man. So that's right after we're done recording here. So this time next week, you'll have an update for us.
We shall see. Well, I'll certainly have an update on how it went.
Yeah. That's cool. So what's your mindset going into this? I mean, there's got to be some nerves, some trepidation. I mean, is this officially going to be your first sort of like be prepared to work for a half hour type of audition, or have you done these kind of things in the past?
Like I was saying before, I've only done this for like callbacks or something like that. So yeah, I guess it is. Cool.
So they're kind of maybe folding the callback process and the initial screening process into one appointment here.
Yeah, I think it's the CD and the assistant director.
Awesome, man. That's so cool. Is this Jack Black's role?
Yes. The what is his character's name? Dewey Finn is the name of it. Yeah.
Support for this episode of Inside Acting is also brought to you in part by VO2GoGo.com, the award-winning voiceover training system and winner of Backstage's Reader's Choice Award for Best Voiceover Training 4 years in a row. Visit VO2GoGo.com/start for a free Getting Started in Voiceover online class that'll help you add voiceover to your acting portfolio. That's VO2GoGo.com/start. We have a comment from William Beaumont, who's a longtime listener and supporter. And a few episodes ago on the podcast, we had this conversation about casting director workshops and the whole crackdown and how 5 different casting workshop entities are now being, pursued by the Attorney General's office and shut down. And 25 different individuals within these 5 businesses are being fined and all sorts of crazy stuff. And William wrote in with some thoughts and some really sort of awesome insights, and I just wanted to share them on the podcast because there's stuff that we didn't talk about in that initial discussion. So feel free to sort of jump in with this, AJ, but I just highlighted some stuff, and William said that the first thing is that the attorney's office, this is how this went down. They planted an investigator in a bunch of these casting workshops undercover. So this guy went in, or woman went in undercover as an actor, and basically went through the process and found that there was illegal activity taking place. And they decided to bring charges against these 5 businesses, which we said includes the Actors Key and a few other sort of mainstream players. And William says he believes that these are criminal charges with a maximum sentence of 1 year in prison and a $100,000 fine. That's some serious shit. Though he says he has obviously no idea whether they will actually push for the full punishment, I guess. And he says that's not the result of just plucking some names out of a hat or going on hearsay. This was a full-scale investigation, and he says one assumes the Attorney General has substantial evidence that these people actually broke the law. Wow, man. I mean, that's pretty
honestly
nuts.
This one helped. Yeah, this one helped me a lot because, I was thinking about what I was saying before and saying like, oh, it seems like, super harsh and like, I don't know that, this is the right way to kind of react, or I don't remember exactly what I said. But the reason that this helped me is because this has been such a hot button topic, a hot button issue for so long. It kind of makes me a little annoyed that the workshops didn't change their practices. Yeah. Knowing that it's a hot button issue. It's like, why wouldn't you do whatever it takes to I don't know, well, abide by the law, but I mean, like, include some kind of additional, say, educational opportunity or whatever for the actors that are coming to the workshop. Like, to me, what this says is like this undercover person went in and it really was just a paid audition or a paid meeting, as opposed to them, learning anything. Because if they went to other, maybe this means that they went to other businesses or other workshops with other casting directors and found that they actually, learned something, and I don't know, for whatever reason, it didn't feel like a paid audition, and therefore they're like, oh, okay, they're not actually breaking the law. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That's exactly what Will says next. Actually, he says no one, including Billy DeMotta, the sort of poster boy for anti-paid casting director workshops. He says no one, including him, or even the Attorney General's office, is against workshops per se. It's just that they have to be exclusively for educational purposes. If you're there to teach actors with a lesson plan and a class structure, he says you're fine. He says these targeted individuals were found to be breaking the law. And Will says that he doesn't do these workshops, or at least he hasn't yet. But his understanding is, and he has seen them blatantly advertised this way, that there's a category of them which basically boils down to the format of getting 3 minutes to do a scene and then getting about a minute of feedback. And many of the times these are done one-on-one. So it's if you're attending this workshop, you don't even get the benefit of hearing the feedback to other actors or sometimes even seeing their work. And Billy DeMotta posted a bunch of feedback sheets online, anonymized. And he says they're pretty laughable. He says they're basically a bunch of scores, like a scale of 1 to 10. Of what your headshot looks like, what your presentation is like, how well you embodied your character, and really nothing more than a comment at the bottom that says something like really strong work or something like that. And that's $40-$50 a pop for that kind of thing. And I have been to workshops, probably half a dozen workshops. I stopped a long time ago, but there was a phase I went through where I went through a bunch of them, and every single one of them, that was my experience. I felt really sort of commodified and shitty and ripped off. And it just left me with a really bad taste in my mouth. So Will says that to his mind, that kind of format can only be described as paying for an audition, especially if the person leading the session opens with a little spiel about what shows they're working on, what office they're working with, what parts they're looking to cast, how their office works, that kind of thing. I mean, that really does set the context for less education as far as like usefulness outside of that particular circumstance, and more of like, here's how to get in my short stack of actors to see. So good points there. I wanted to kind of toss the ball to you, AJ, because he kind of addresses what you talked about as far as these, workshops being something similar to what like David H. Lawrence says. He always compares, not always, but oftentimes he'll compare being an actor to, being a plumber. And he draws a lot of parallels between what it's like to run a business as a plumbing supply salesperson and an actor. And David brings up a lot of great points. For more on that, check out the VO to Go-Go curriculum and David's VO to Go-Go blog. There's lots of good stuff there. But I know, AJ, you said you didn't quite see, forgive me if I'm butchering this, but you didn't quite see the difference between paying for a cast director workshop and going to a trade show to offer your wares as a plumbing supply salesman.
Yeah, well, and William does kind of lay it out like, well, I'll just kind of read through what he said. The key difference in my mind, he says, that those circumstances, you're paying a trade show organizer for a space to show your wares and their advertising to attract foot traffic. You are not paying the Home Depot store manager directly to place your stuff on their shelves. It's actually a really good analogy.
Yeah.
Similarly, if you had to slip the HR manager $50 to get an interview at Google, that would be illegal too. You can't be asked to give money to the person you get a job to get you a job. They control the decision making over. You can pay, market your wares. So for actors, that means it's perfectly legal to put on a showcase and invite casting directors to come see you. They just can't ask you to pay them money to come see you. It's not dissimilar to anti-bribery laws.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it does. It sounds increasingly sleazy when you use, this analogy. I guess the only caveat to that, or the only sort of thing that I might play devil's advocate, is that the casting directors don't actually get you. They're not the ones that are hiring you. And I think that's been their argument too, that there's like this bit of a loophole where the producers are the ones that are actually hiring the actors. So you can't be asked to give money to the person to get you a job they control the decision making over. The casting directors don't. All they do is bring you in a room and put you in front of the decision makers. They're not the ones that are actually hiring people. So, and I think that's the loop. I think it's the argument. I think that's the loophole or the argument that they've been making from the beginning. So, and it's a good one, because they're not the people that are actually writing the checks. So, I'm not saying that, what William is saying is wrong. I think it's a really brilliant analogy. I'm just saying that, I think that that's how they've sort of managed to bypass that law.
I think that's a super weak argument and loophole, personally. Because, they may not officially be doing the hiring, but they certainly are controlling the access that you get to be hired. So it's just like one tiny little baby step removed from doing the hiring. I mean, if it's like, I don't know. It's like if you want to interview somewhere and the only way you can, not the only way, but a large percentage of your opportunity is to sort of get an appointment with a receptionist, and the receptionist puts on classes where you can pay them, and then they might, the context is that they'll put you in the short stack and then maybe pass your name up the ladder. Or decide that you're somebody that's worth bringing. I don't know. To me, it seems kind of. It doesn't make any difference to me. I think that's still pretty icky.
I wasn't like saying it wasn't icky. I think, I just think of like my career and thinking of, if we go with a show, like if I use an example of a show that I've gone out more for that show than any other show, like The Blacklist, like I have clearly built some kind of relationship with that casting director, and I've gone into audition for that show, 12 times, 13 times, something like that. And I've never been hired. So like if it was up to if it truly was up to the casting director, I feel like I would have already had a job, because they believe in me and they keep bringing me back, but I have yet to be hired. To me, that's taking a really, I don't know, specific and overall look at the industry and what each role does, like how it works, how things work in the business. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I think that's why I was saying that.
Dennis. Who's Dennis? Will brings up one more point that I think is good, because when we aired the sort of Redux interview, not Redux, but the interview with David H. Lawrence the 17th on Going Pro Workshop, and David made a lot of good points for sort of a capitalist's approach to workshops. William brings up a good point, and this actually speaks to, in a way that I wasn't able to sort of put language around until just now. This speaks to some anonymous comments that we saw and sort of received from that interview, where some people listening felt like David really kind of rolled over us, and we kind of didn't play hardball to challenge him on some of his views. And a lot of actors felt that like somehow his approach was unfair or not taking into consideration the journey of other actors, maybe who aren't as flush with money. And on one level, it's like, well, that's your responsibility, right? Like we live in a free society, presumably, where everybody has equal opportunity or equal access. Again, I'm speaking in vast generalities here, because I actually don't believe that everybody has equal opportunity, unfortunately. But the idea is that the information is out there for everybody to take advantage of and then tailor to their unique situation. But Will brings up that if you need to have money to get money, as in the case with these workshops, the gap can do nothing but widen, and that is not in the interest of the future of either this business or this country, especially a country that prides itself on chasing the dream of infinite possibility. which I think is something important to consider. I don't think there's any sort of action to take on that, rather than just sort of just put that in your brain box and sort of meditate on it, because capitalism is a double-edged sword, and we all know that the gap between those who have and those who don't is widening. And I think it speaks to an underlying sort of collective cultural mythology about who gets our love and attention and consideration and care, and who doesn't. It's weird where we draw the lines when you think about it. Like, if you were sick, AJ, I would absolutely do whatever I could to sort of help nurse you back to health, and I wouldn't dream of charging you. I would never dream of making you pay me to help you get well. But like my neighbor that I don't really know that well, no, I don't really see the benefit for me in donating my time and energy to them to make them well. So it's just something to take into consideration, because our journeys and our actions and our philosophies do affect others.
I had never really taken into consideration the idea of the wage gap playing into this issue. I mean, I think David Lawrence was the first person to kind of like bring that idea into the conversation with what he said, kind of like what William is saying here. I don't know. It had never really been a consideration, I guess.
Yeah, and this is something we could sort of tease out for hours. I mean, $40, $50 is really not a lot of money. It's really not. But to some people, it is. People who are scrounging by on rice and beans and don't know where their next rent check's going to come from. That can be, a lot of money, no matter what. Even though in the larger scheme of things, $50 is a pretty laughable sum.
Well, and I also, I mentioned this when I recorded the last episode, I would never want that to be the case for anyone. Like, if that $40 or $50 wasn't going towards something that's, let's call it controversial or questionable, like a CD workshop, if it was going towards, I don't know, something that was, pretty necessary for your career, whatever it is, name it. I would never want anyone to like buy that and then starve for a couple of days because they couldn't afford rice and beans. I mean, that's ridiculous. That's you're in survival mode. You're not going to be able to be creative. Your whole existence is going to be preoccupied with that, and you're going to bring it into the room with you too when you go into audition. So, I don't know. To me, it's important that that people address the sort of basics, the basic foundations of their existence. We went in the cast of the show that I went to Virginia with. Since we were doing it at a university, we went into this like acting 101 class, and someone raised their hand and asked us the question that we get often into the podcast, which is like, if I were to move to a major market like Los Angeles or New York, what should I do? And I said, the first thing you need to do is like get grounded, have a foundation, have a life, get a job, make sure that you have a place to live, a community, all that stuff, which we've said on the podcast before, but it's so important. And I don't know, that's just kind of what came up for me last episode when we were talking about like the Starbucks thing. I'm not disparaging a job at Apple, a job at Starbucks or whatever, but if you're not making enough money to do all of the things you want to do in your acting career and all of the things you want to do in your life and put money away and save money, then something's wrong, and you've got to like figure that out. And I think too many of us, especially young people, especially artists, don't do enough to kind of focus on that.
Yeah. And kind of just going back to what I said a little bit earlier about, not everybody having equal opportunity. For instance, I, as an educated white American male, have a lot more opportunity than someone who might be a different gender or a different race, or maybe not have the same education. There are more doors open to me than there are to a lot of people, and that's really shitty and unfortunate. And I actually feel almost like a jerk talking about this, like hashtag white guilt, right? But we do all have an understanding of how the sort of system we're just in works, and we can work to change it, and we can use the resources we have available to us to play the system as best as we can. I mean, for instance, we all may not have the same sort of doors open to us, but we all do have access to a public library. And there is a ton of free information out there that you can use to improve yourself, to up-level your skills, to learn anything, and to start, working your way up to a place where you are completely financially and, life-wise, just sort of taking care of yourself so that you can have the opportunities that people, like somebody who maybe had an easier time of it in our society, also has.
I really appreciate you saying that, because sometimes it's easy to forget. Like, I don't want to come across as somebody who's like, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, and meanwhile not conscious of the people who don't have the same opportunities.
Yeah. Well, we would love to hear our listeners' thoughts on this next branch of this conversation. We're going deep now, man. We are really going deep. And, as we just said, and we've said many times, AJ, you and I have a very sort of narrow view of these issues and of the world and this industry, because we're restricted by, how the world responds to us. So I would love to hear, people who have had a different experience. I'd really love to hear, the ups and downs and ins and outs and obstacles and, victories and gifts, everything about the journey that maybe we're not discussing, that we're leaving out. Please call in, write in, let us know what your experience is and what you would like to add to this, so that people listening can really be armed with the best information possible to go out there and really make a difference in the world. So that's all I got. Thank you, Will, for writing in. Anything you wanted to add before we jump into the interview?
No, sir.
Okay. Well, here's my third and final part with director Bryan Beasley. Enjoy this, guys. We'll catch you on the other side. So you were directing the skits for the award show,
yep.
And then how you've worked with Val Kilmer.
Yeah. So just another here. And
I've worked with Val Kilmer too, by the way. He's quite a character.
He is
We got to get him on the
he's
podcast.
He's a total character. Yeah, we can get into that story in a minute. He total character. So basically, yeah, that was kind of my first documentary. I did a film called Unconquered, which was about a Native American artist by the name of Alan Hauser, who passed away in '94. And it was kind of about his legacy and about how his two sons have also become artists. And one kind of followed in his footsteps and is very lyrical and does these like very Native American themed. Well, they're both sons do Native American themed stuff, but his is just more lyrical, like, big busts of buffaloes, while the other one does very thought-provoking stuff of like a teepee on its side with like, pictures of like kids on fire. I mean, just, like thought-provoking, but very, very different. So, and that all came about. And again, one of those other transitions in my life where I never thought I'd be doing documentaries. And literally my best friend growing up was a kid named Bob Ross in Oklahoma City. Went on to become a lawyer there stayed in Oklahoma, runs a foundation called the Inasmuch Foundation. And they are very, very successful throughout the Midwest. Alan Hauser grew up in Oklahoma, was raised in Oklahoma, and they wanted to do, this. The Oklahoma History Center wanted to do this piece on him, and he was like, "Hey, my best friend growing up is a film director out in Los Angeles. Do you think we could hire him?" And the museum was kind of like, "Well, okay, we need to meet with this guy." So I'm in town. I think I'm in town for a wedding or something in Oklahoma City. He hasn't told me anything about this, and he comes up to me. He's like, "Hey, you want to have a meeting with the museum tomorrow about this film?" I'm like, "Okay, well, what is it?" It's like, and he was like, "It's about a sculptor," and he didn't know his name, and I couldn't Google it. So I'll never forget this. I walk into the Oklahoma History Center, and there's this gentleman who runs the museum there named Bob Blackburn, who's a pretty big deal historian there throughout the Midwest, but especially in Oklahoma. And I walk in, and I'm like in shorts and a T-shirt, and the entire board of the museum's there in suits. And they're there to hear my pitch. I don't even know the guy's name, like the Alan Hauser, the main guy of the film. completely unprepared. So I remember even Bob was like, "Oh, sorry," like totally screwed you here. So I put on my best, salesman. I'm, kind of like, they're like, "How do you see the film?" I'm like, how do you see the film?
The classic move.
You tell me how the film. You're like, yeah, okay, great. And they were not impressed. They were not impressed at all. I remember I got on a plane. Before I got on a plane, I called my producing partner out here, and I was like, guys, I need to put together a presentation pronto. This is a big deal. I want this job. And we got back here, and we were at the production house, and we put together a mock-up of what the DVD would look like, or the DVD case. And I did a very detailed breakdown on what I think the movie should be. Blah 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 blah. And I mean, the truth of the matter is that my best friend was the guy writing the checks. And so I think my presentation gave them a little bit of ease. But they were the first interview that we did with the historian we were in Santa Fe. Blackman was there. I know he was there to make sure that I was, everything was going to go kosher. And we did a 2.5 hour interview, and he walked out and he just patted me on the back and he's like, okay, we're in good hands. And so the museum was on our side from that moment on.
Wow.
So it was great. The film went on to win tons of festivals. It was definitely it's one of the best pieces I've ever directed. And that definitely opened up, going to all those festivals and getting that on PBS opened up, a great world for me to do other documentaries.
Last question I want to ask you before we wrap up. We have 2 final questions, but I got one in addition to that. What is it like? Because as a director, you're basically freelance. You're like an independent contractor, and you're just sort of going from job to job. And then once one job's over, there's no guarantee you'll ever work again.
Nope.
I've always been really fascinated by what that is like, especially for somebody who's got a nice body of work under their belts with a lot of connections. Could you describe what it's like to just sort of bounce around from job to job and not really know where things are coming from?
It is interesting. I've definitely learned how to save my money. I mean, even with headshots had a various it would be huge in January. Everyone would be like pilot season, and then it would completely die in the summer, and then would pick back up in the fall, and then Thanksgiving would show up, and I wouldn't get another job until January 1st. So I think that kind of prepared me a little bit for it. I will say it was a huge distinction. Prior to me having kids and after having kids has been 2 very different things. Before I had kids, I always just had confidence that things were going to work out. And that's mostly just not because I'm sitting at home waiting for the phone to ring. It's because I'm out networking, or I was at film festivals. And it's like anything in this business. You got to have, I have 7 balls in the air, but only one of them's going to come. Maybe one of them's going to work out, So I was always kind of fine with that. But after having kids, it definitely just the stress of I'm in charge of 2 people eating, so it definitely, I think it's even lit a bigger fire under my ass because there were times I would go months without working when I was single that I was like, I've saved up enough. I'm good. Things are going to work out. And they always did. They legitimately always did. Not because of luck, but because I was out hustling. But with the kids, it's kind of taken it to a new level where I'm even this January, I was even in the photography, I'm calling all my clients hey, what's going on at the Grove? Let's get a few more events over there. Right. So, but yeah, to really answer your question, you have to have complete and utter faith in yourself and your talent, and know that if you're putting good work out there, it's going to lead to more good work. I've always tried to take solace in that fact that I'm going to bust my ass on this project, and someone else is going to see it, and they're going to hire me for the next project. And it's so far always worked.
So far, that's how it's worked. Good work begets more
good work. Yeah.
Good work. Mm-hmm. Weird philosophical question I want to drop in here just because it popped into my head, and I'm curious what you'd say. How would you distinguish between working hard and working smart in this industry? What would that look like for you?
That's a great question. I guess the smart aspect is just kind of recognizing where the dead ends are. And what I mean by that is that, when you're out there networking or meeting new people, if they make it obvious that this isn't going to work with them, I'm not, for whatever reason, like this film isn't going to happen, then it's not necessarily smart to keep like pounding on that door if it's just never going to happen. Like I kind of feel that maybe you're wasting your time, and those energies could be better put towards something that actually is going to get made. A perfect example. I mean, this literally just happened to. I had a phone call right before we did this podcast where I was in talks to do, and still kind of are, to do this feature documentary about Colorado College. They're getting ready to have the 50th anniversary for a thing called. They do block semesters where for 3 weeks they do intensive studies on one thing, and so they want to kind of celebrate this. And the feedback came back that they want 2 professors in house to kind of handle the entire project, which is, I mean, they would shoot it and do everything, so there really is no place for me. And I talked to the main guy at the foundation who would pay for it, and I was kind of like, well, like they're going to have a whole philosophical shift for me to kind of fit into this, because I'm going to bring my own elements and my own qualities to this project, and I just don't know if that's even possible at this point. So, I mean, I'm not giving up on it, but there's definitely a point where they're going to say X, Y, and Z, and that's going to be it. And so I've got to know that I shouldn't be knocking on that door anymore. Like there's other projects I need to give more time to. I guess because I say that, but I don't want you always hear the stories of like, I never gave up. I mean,
I persisted.
Yeah, and you definitely want to do that. But if they just make it very clear that you're not the guy, then stop wasting your time with that.
Yeah.
Or change the conversation. Do a different project with it. You know what I'm saying? So there's an aspect of that. So and again, this goes back to what I was just talking about, me having kids. Like I just don't have time. I can't waste 3 years on a project that isn't going to happen. Like I need to know that we're moving in the right direction on certain things. So.
Yeah, I feel like if you hit a dead end like that, where there's a philosophical difference, it's not like about convincing them that you're the person. It's like there's just, like you said, there's no room for you to fit into this. I feel like a nice pivot would be just to sort of go, okay, if it's not me, how can I support you guys in making this awesome? Can I introduce you to somebody that might be able to make something easier for you? Maybe that's a way to sort of still maintain that great relationship.
You're 100% right. Because I mean, the producer that I will use for that project if it happens is a Colorado College graduate. She graduated like 3 years ago. So I was like, listen, even if I'm not a part of this, you guys should use her, because she will give a perspective of someone young. Because they want to, the documentary is going to focus on people in their 80s. I was like, you should hire her. She went to the school. So you're totally right. That's the right move. So and it ingratiates yourself. There's no hard feelings.
Yeah. Somebody said to me once, if you have the heart of a servant, you can't lose, or something like that. Right. I'm butchering that saying, but the idea being that like show up in service and really it's like no doors are closed to you.
That's very true. And they'll remember you for it.
Yeah.
Instead of the person that ran off in a tantrum.
It's kind of rare. There's a lot of this industry is built on what's in it for me.
Yes,
and
it is.
Like the old saying is, like, it's better to give than to receive. It's so true. Yeah, I'm sorry.
It is.
One thing I'm learning as I get older, it's so true. Anyway, we're out of time. So our final 2 questions. We ask these questions of all our guests, and I'm really excited to hear yours. You may have answered one, but maybe not. So here's the first one. Did this path, this journey, this industry, this career, did it choose you, or did you choose it?
Oh, I definitely chose it. My dad's a doctor. My brothers are doctors. All my friends that stayed in Oklahoma are all lawyers and doctors. It could have been I don't want to say easy, because law school would have been medical school would have been very tough for me. But that would have been a safe choice. And I knew at a very young age that I love Oklahoma. My entire family lives there. I go back often. I want my 2 daughters to go to Oklahoma and love it. But I knew that wasn't for me. And so I definitely made a conscious decision to chase this dream, and still am. Like I'm still chasing the dream. So and no matter how successful I hope to be, I will always be chasing the dream. So.
Yeah, it never ends.
No, and it shouldn't. That's the fun of it, right?
Yeah. All life is practice, right? You're just always trying to get to that next level. If you could take all your experience, and that includes all your victories and wins, as well as all your embarrassing pitfalls and stumbles, and if you could condense all of that down into one nugget of wisdom or truth to pass on to somebody kind of one step behind you, what would that nugget of wisdom or truth that you'd share be?
My father gave me like one of those little, I don't know if it's a coaster or a tablet or whatever it is, but it sits on my desk. And it's a quote from Winston Churchill, and it just simply says, "Never give up." So I look at that every morning. Never give up.
Well, there it is. Bryan, thank you so much for
thanks for having me, guys. This has been fantastic.
Yeah, thanks for inviting us into your beautiful home. If people want to connect with you, see your work, connect with you online, where can they go?
BryanBeasley.com. Make it real simple.
All right. And you're on social media, too. I think you have a Twitter account.
Yeah, Bryan. Yeah, that's also Twitter's Bryan Beasley, and Facebook is Bryan Beasley. Bryan with a Y, by the way.
Cool. And we've got the spelling and all those links on our website and the show notes for this episode. So, Bryan, thank you again. This was really great.
Oh, thank you, guys. Really enjoyed it.
Hey folks, welcome back. Hope you enjoyed the final part of Trev's interview with Bryan Beasley. I am once again at a disadvantage having not heard it, but I'm excited to hear it. Trev, any debriefing you'd like to do for this one?
If I never listen to this interview again, my big takeaway is that it really is about who you know, and you should never be afraid to call on your friends and peers and your circle of relationships for favors, for opportunities, both giving and getting stuff. I mean, be there to help other people, and don't be afraid to ask other people for help. Because Bryan's story, is the antithesis of happening in a vacuum. At not one point did he not cite somebody who helped him or taught him something or opened some door for him. So I would say that's really the big takeaway for me.
Awesome. Well, what is your pick of the week?
So my pick of the week is a novel by an independent writer that I really like named Colin Wright. He's a world traveler as well. He's a really fascinating guy. And he wrote this novel called Puncture Up a while ago that I've been wanting to read, and I finally picked it up a couple weeks ago and finished it not too long ago. And it's a really fascinating sort of deep dive about human-created parallel universes. And I don't want to give anything away, but it's a really interesting foray into the idea, and there's more and more sort of scientists and physicists and people getting on board with this theory, that we actually live in a computer simulation, that humanity and the world and our reality is basically a hologram. And this novel takes that idea and runs with it. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. I mean, talk about a page turner. It was a little slow for me getting started, but once I got into the meat of it, I finished it in like a day and a half. Pretty cool. You can get it on your Kindle. It's like $4 or $5. Puncture Up. I really enjoyed it.
Am I going to feel like nothing matters after reading this?
No, in fact, you're going to feel like God after reading this.
Okay.
I'll leave it at that. So,
cool.
Your pick of the week. We talked about this a little bit last night.
I would never recommend someone watch a big blockbuster, especially a Marvel movie, on a plane. But, what are you going to do? You're stuck in a big metal tube for several hours. So Doctor Strange was one of the available films, and I had wanted to see it. And I started watching it, and I figured I'll turn it off if, it's just not entertaining on a tiny, seat back screen. But it was so good. I watched the whole thing, and the thing that I loved about it, I mean, I'm probably really late to this party because it's a Marvel movie and probably a lot of people have seen it. But if you're not into superhero movies, if you're one of those people that's like big action films and these superhero films are not really my thing, then I would say maybe check this one out for its message about, I guess, transformation. Like, there's so many messages about like how your mind can heal yourself, how we, very similar to Trevor, like we control our reality. If your intentions are good, but you call upon, the darkness or dark energy to further your agenda, are your intentions still pure and good? There's all these really amazing questions about life and the concept of time, and thoroughly enjoyed it, and not just for the superhero action filmy kind of stuff in it. So so Doctor Strange is my pick of the week.
That's so good to hear, because I saw the trailer for that and I was like, pass. Like, I'm kind of over these Marvel superhero blockbusters, but to hear that there's a really core message about empowerment is pretty cool.
Yeah, it's great. I would definitely recommend you check it out, Trev.
Awesome. And then we have one more pick of the week to mention. This comes from our awesome production coordinator, Jen Levin. And her pick for this week is the movie Get Out. I haven't seen it, but I've seen the trailer for it, and it looks really interesting. It's like a horror, like comedy, like racial commentary thriller. It looks like a really kind of interesting mix of genres, and it's got 100% on Rotten Tomatoes, which is a very, very rare thing. So Jen says she was in for something amazing when she went to go see it as a part of a SAG-AFTRA Film Society event. She says if you're a union actor, by the way, she highly recommends joining the Film Society. But she said this movie has prompted her to go down a research rabbit hole to look up things like racial relations throughout history. She never thought a thriller movie could be so thought-provoking and layered with some very deep messages. She said it's got a very strong message, and it only got stronger after she left the theater and kept thinking about it. She said it just was beautifully shot, beautifully composed as a story, and she would recommend not looking too much up, not doing too much research before going in to see this movie, because she thinks that going in with no ideas or expectations is really the best way to do it. And personally, that's the way I like to do it too, just to go in blind for the most part. So you can watch the trailer, find it on YouTube. There's also a link on our website, and then check it out. I'm definitely going to see it. I've just heard from so many people that this is a great, fun ride with some really thought-provoking stuff.
It's almost like the idea of going to see it has become viral. Yeah. Like everybody's talking about it, which is great. I love that.
Yeah. Awesome, man. Well, that is Puncture Up, a novel about parallel universes from Colin Wright. Doctor Strange, the latest Marvel installment, and Get Out, a thought-provoking racial relations thriller. Did I sum those up well?
Yeah, that was pretty good.
All right, cool.
Somebody should hire you to, host a podcast or something.
I think that does it for this episode. Anything you wanted to add before we skedaddle?
No, let's do that. Let's skedaddle. Where did that come from? Can we look up the etymology of skedaddle?
We should. I don't really know where that came from.
Listeners, get on it. Today's episode of Inside Acting was produced and co-hosted by yours truly, AJ Meyer, and of course, Trevor Algat. Jen Levin is our production coordinator. Gadali Gubrick is our marketing and web director. Deborah Smith is our community manager. And of course, Grace Gordon is joining our team as the new director of public relations. Fern Lim designed our logo.
You can sign up for our weekly email dispatch and listen to all of our episodes at our website, insideacting.net. You can also find us on social media and wherever you get your podcasts. And if you've got a minute, leaving us a review on iTunes, a favorable review would be really, really great. It helps us a lot and definitely helps people find the show.
Special thanks to our sponsors, Rehearsal Pro, View to Go-Go, and printheadshots.com. And thanks to you, our listeners. Visit our website to subscribe to our weekly newsletter, get links to everything we talked about on this and other episodes. And if you'd like, support the continued production of the show with a small or large financial contribution. You can make a one-time, no-strings-attached, tax-deductible contribution via PayPal, Square, or Venmo, or sign up as an Inside Acting member for $7 a month. And not only will you be supporting the podcast, but you'll also get some great content and a great community to boot. Visit us at InsideActing.net to learn more and show some love.
And that does it for episode 269 of Inside Acting. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next week. And in the meantime, empower.
Not to be confused with Empire.
No, that'd be a weird thing to leave people with.
Empire. Am I supposed to watch the show? I don't understand. What are they telling me?